Welcome to How to Date Old Photographs. I'm Candy. I've worked here at MGC for 18 years. So and this is my first time with dating old photographs. First of all, some housekeeping. If you are online, you should have gotten a handout along with your reminder notice. If you did not, for some reason, get the handout, please contact us either at mgc@mymcpl.org or give us a call. The information is at the last slide also. Please mute your audio and your video on your computers. And then we'll go through the housekeeping for the people who are here. First of all, if there's an emergency, go out this door. You can either go to the front doors and out that way or around into the back here and go through the microfilm room. And there's a door back there and go on to the through that door. And then there's another door that goes outside. Please mute any phones you have with you or silence them. What else? Oh, bathrooms. Out this door, and they're in between the elevators. So I think those are the major announcements we usually make. Dating old photographs. Who doesn't have some old photographs? You're not too sure when they were taken or where. And we're going to try and cover some of it. It's not an exact science. But we're trying to give you some hints on how to do it. And we'll have to go into a little history on it too. So anyway. How to begin? Start with what you know. This picture here is a picture of the I.B. Cunningham family. First of all, consider where it came from. Who gave it to you? Did you inherit it? Who owned it before you did? And then once you find the name, and this one actually did have a name on the back, which I recommend if you know them. Start a little research on them. The Cunningham family is in the 1900 census. They had I believe 5 girls and 2 boys, but there are 8 children in here. And if you look at the 1900, they had 8 people listed after the husband and wife. The baby is actually listed as a granddaughter, but with further research, he's actually a grandson, and he was born in 1897. So we figure that the photograph was taken about 1898 or 1899. So that can kind of give you a frame of reference. Using census or birth and death dates, family documents. Some people kept diaries and would mention getting a photograph taken, and that's all helpful. So you can get all the information you can on these people. How to analyze the photo elements. And you've got to find out what type of a photograph this is and what film processes were used to create it. Is this a special gathering or a family event? Is there any information on the photo that would tell you the name of or the photographer, studio, or time period? Definitely flip it over and take a look. Sometimes you have to get a magnifying glass to read the handwriting, but you at least have clues there. Look at the fashions. Was that a dress of the 1890, 1900 period? Also, hair, accessories, props, and backdrops. Those all indicate a certain time period in photography, especially if they went to a studio to have it done. This is a timeline of different types of photography. It all started with Louis Daguerre in France. He started in the early 1830s with what they called a camera obscura. And he experimented with glass and various things and various chemicals to bring out the daguerreotypes, and it had to do with beaten silver. They basically made a negative image. By backing it, it became a positive image. And then from there, they went to ambrotypes, tintypes, and so on down. And we'll cover a lot of this. The 1839 is when he actually patented the daguerreotype. And even though he was from France, he patented it in England. This was a copper plate with silver and other chemicals. It was sort of a mirror-like surface, and even people noted that it was like looking in a mirror. It was best viewed at an angle, but you got to be careful on your angles, because if you viewed it at a certain angle, it became a negative again. If you notice, the picture itself has glass and the velvet matting, and it was framed in a case. The studio that was mentioned was Anson's in New York City at 589 Broadway. If you're looking for the studio, you could find them in the city directory for New York City at this particular address after 1853. Before then, they were down the street at 633. So this kind of gives you an idea of a date. This gentleman here was the first president of Liberia. And they figured that he had been in the city at about this time because of articles in the newspaper. There again, the outside sources help you a lot in determining when this was made. 1860s, basically the end date on these, because they developed a cheaper process. If you're interested, I have a book on the back. People actually study daguerreotypes, and that is the daguerreotype annual. The next one was the ambrotypes, also encased in glass. It was coated with a glue-like liquid and treated with light-sensitive chemicals, like silver nitrate, to bring up the image. They were often backed with dark varnish or cloth. There again, it was a negative image, but these actually did become positive when they did this. And they existed about 10 years, about 5 years worth of commercial use. Then the tintypes came in. And the tintypes were on iron. They were processed similar to the ambrotypes, but they were sealed with varnish. These could be encased, but wasn't essential. And they were popular at various events like battlefields, carnivals, and beaches. People didn't have to go to a photo studio to get this done. And the first ones were basically like sitting for a portrait. It took 20 to 30 minutes to get a daguerreotype done. And you can imagine holding a child or a baby still for 30 minutes. So you kind of have to look at that. And the first two were fairly costly. Ambrotypes were cheaper than daguerreotypes, but tintypes were really cheap. And there were a lot made, and there were not only made of people, they were also made of scenery and things of that nature. If you're looking at the top one, that's actually a famous actress in the 1860s. And this fella down here is a Civil War soldier. We figure it's after the Civil War because he has his medal on. Yes.
So was most of this or all this done in the United States, or was this?
Yes. Well, it was also done in Europe, for sure. Okay.
If you wanna hide that candy, go to the more, the 3 dots.
Oh, okay. And of course.
Hide floating media.
There we go. Okay. Okay. What the next one is something called the carte de visite, which was basically a visiting card. Everybody had cards who did morning or evening visits to places. Sometimes they just leave their card. Well, sometimes they leave their picture. Since it was done on paper and they only did like a 2.5 inch by 4 inch card, you could fit 8 inches on the paper. The paper was coated with albumin, or basically egg white. So you could actually get 8 different images of a particular item. Cabinet cards, which were also occurred about the same time, they were a little bigger, 4 by 6. They were paper photos, often with decorative edges. They were larger size. Between 1886 and 1895, it was popular to include the name and or location of the photographer's studio. In the early 1870s, the federal government put a tax on photographs. So you'll see perhaps a tax stamp on the back of your photograph, kind of give you an idea. It was so much, but they were also paying for the Civil War at that time. So it's something to look for. These things, like your cabinet cards, you'll also start seeing pictures of famous people like Abraham Lincoln or Mark Twain. Another one was Queen Victoria. People were kind of fascinated by that, so they were looking at these things that they only heard about before. Postcards. This is when they finally figured out and went with the post office where they could put a photo image on one side And pre-1902, they allowed only an address on the back. At the time, the USPS was actually called the Post Office Department. Look for the postmark. The stamp should be on the back there, so you can help date the photograph itself. I actually have some of these. I know the ones I have, they no doubt had copies that actually went over to Europe. But there again, you can see this gentleman here from the uniform. Even though we don't know who they are, we do know that he was in the American Expeditionary Force, which was in mid-World War I era. Could have gone down to Mexico to kind of work on not having Juarez come back up here. Or he could have gone over to Europe. On the back, it does say from George. So it's probably George there, but we have no last name. And this one is more likely from the 20s. Then we come to the age of rolled film. George Eastman was head of the company, Eastman Kodak. The first films were done in 1885. They sold the camera as Kodak #1. And then around 1900, they developed the Brownie camera. It was a little box. It was only $1, so photography expanded quite a bit, and it was now available to everybody, pretty much. Of course, professional product is still the best, but personal photography improved. And people liked being able to take their own pictures. In the 1920s, they had the 35mm lens. In the 30s, you had the single lens reflex lenses. 36 color film came in. And that was not only for your photographs, it was also for the movies. They started filming them in color. 1948, Polaroid, the instant camera. And then people at Eastman Kodak in 1975 developed a digital camera, which was available to the public in 1981. Kodak also developed a like thing to Polaroid, which came out in about 1975 or 76 for a little competition there. Gatherings and special events. When you see a photo like this in your family archive, you might start talking to some of the family, seeing if you can account for these people. My suggestion would be to try and make a copy of it, so that if someone knows who they are, you can write it down at the bottom. I wouldn't want to write it on the photograph itself, but to write on the copy. You could kind of write around and put arrows in and that sort of thing. Look at the clothing. You'll see, like, this gentleman has a vest and kind of a cutaway jacket. Look for the seasonal decor. You know, this is probably a spring or summer. Because it looks rather neat around there. and things of that nature. There's no leaves or snow. Landmarks. If that building still exists, you could also look up, there is a window up there with some writing on it. If you know approximately where the address is, you could go into the city directory and see where that actually was. Like I say, look for the, looking for the location. There again, that's where city directories come in. And you never know which cousin knows. So be sure and inventory all the relatives. You can also, if you've got pictures that you know who the people are, you can compare them against some of these pictures such as that. Looking at these two photographs, the first one is a boat or a ship picture. We know that it came out of Queenstown, which is in Ireland. And I believe, if I remember right, that is the port for Dublin. These people were going to Australia. And it's there again, it's a group picture. You probably can't pick out the person that you're looking for, but it kind of gives your genealogy some history to it. This is what they traveled with. This one over here, the second photo on your right, is a wedding picture. You can tell they both got their hands out with the rings on them. If you'll notice, her wedding dress is not white. My histories on this class show that in 1839, Queen Victoria wore a white wedding dress, and it was popular. But most people did not wear white. They wore black or brown. Brown was more in the 1870s and 80s, but that dress not only was the wedding dress, but that was the Sunday going to church dress. So you didn't have a white wedding dress that you could not use after that point in time. People only had a certain amount of clothes. So it probably wasn't too stylish. If you're interested after class, I do have the Sears catalog from 1897 back in the back, and you can kind of see the different fashions that people would, you know, the middle and lower income people would get if they did not make their own. This is definitely made by a seamstress. You can tell by the fanciness of the dress. Okay, I also kind of jumped this a little bit. Looking for your telltale accessories and props. Rings, veils, flowers, bows, and tiaras before 1900 or 1901. Depending on the decade, just depended on what they put on the dress. Flowers were easy to get, so they may have carried flowers. Certain ethnic weddings, such as African-American weddings, they might be jumping the broom, which is a tradition. Or in Jewish weddings, the huppahs, or the kind of tent-like structure that they married under. Like I said, 1840s with the white dresses. They also wore blue, which meant fidelity, and purple in the honor of the war dead from the Civil War. They oftentimes recycled or handed down the dresses through the generations. If it was a little fancy, they altered it. Just so that they could use it. Hidden in plain sight, information on the folder, photo. The name of the studio or the photographer. This is another one where you go to the city directory and look to see if you could find them or not. I put a couple of books out on the, one of them's on biographies of photographers, and the other one is on actually photographers in Jackson County. Or you can do an internet search and see. Looking at the type of finish on there can kind of give you an idea of what era the photograph came from. The color of the card, it could be tinted as such. Corners came in, I believe in the 1890s, and some of them have beveled edges around there, or photo borders, and the lettering. Like I was telling you, they had a Civil War stamp on there. Excuse me. With the photographer's initials and date. So anyway,
Andy,
yes.
on your first one, it says name of studio photographer. Another thing that might be helpful to struck me is sometimes in these old phone directories, you go to the yellow pages, you know, where people are advertising and you can see.
Right. And the thing is in city directories, they have ads in there with pictures and things and engravings. So that's something you want to look at. You want to look, and you can see on the back here where the revenue stamp is on there. It'd be interesting sometime to look it up and see how much money they actually got from these. Finally, fashion. Here are a few key elements. Length and cut of the skirt or the bodice or the sleeves. Sleeves did change over time. High fashion, for instance, in the 1890s, the sleeves were little puff sleeves. They proceeded to bloom out and become what they called like a mutton sleeves with the cuff at the end. They weren't very practical for everyday work and things of that nature. Was the hair, was it styled up or was it down? Did they have curls? Did they have bangs? Bangs in the early 1890s were popular, and after 1896 were not. Did they carry anything? Did they wear jewelry, gloves, or did they have a bag or a purse with them? Oftentimes, if you look at the jewelry, it may have been handed down and you may have that piece. With men, the length and cut of the jacket. What size lapels did they have? Were they narrow or were they wide? For instance, in the 1950s, they were kind of narrow. 1960s, they were wide. And if there was any trim on there. Were there shirt collars? She shows a standing up collar but shirt collars were detachable. It was easier to wash a shirt collar than it was to wash the whole shirt. So they were detachable, where they folded over. Facial hair, did they have sideburns? How long did they have a beard? And what kind of a haircut did they have? There are actually books just on all these things. Neckties. Depending on the era, it depended on how a necktie was tied. Some people did not wear them. Hats, was it a bowler? Was it a Homburg? Was it a boater, which are straw hats that men usually only wore during the summer and put away on Labor Day? Or with your pocket square, your handkerchief. How did they fold it and put it in their pocket? You can tell the era by what they did. Here's a typical picture of a woman that actually this lady had come over in 1891 from Germany. The lady, they figured the photo was done somewhere between 1891 and 95. Her hair is up with curls. The style of the sleeve was a little puff, so it might have been 1893 or so. And the bodice was the style of that time with kind of a straight skirt. It doesn't look like she has a bustle, which is a little earlier. So looking at that, you can kind of figure that out. We do have a name, so we can also figure out approximately when this was taken. This was taken at a studio. So if you look at the background, you can see the flowers, kind of Victorian type items sitting around. And here's a man who, if you look at the hairstyle, including or the absence thereof. Otherwise he could be balding. The style of the collar. It looks like he has a probably a detachable collar. The necktie style, which is just a simple knot. You know, look at it also. Do they have bow ties? Bow ties are a certain era also. And the jacket type, which it buttons quite a way up compared to some of the jackets. And the lapel. So it's a medium lapel. So it is, you're able to see that. And of course, the studio is down here, which you can read it better than I can here. But that's something that you can look at. Early 20th century fashion. And this is just a shortened version. Women emphasized curves. They had tight waists and hems went to the ground. Usually big hair and big hats. In the Edwardian period, they also had kind of a top knot, which was a bun that was pulled up to the top of the head. And they also used inserts in your hair, and that was not only to make the hair fuller, but it was also to secure your hat with a hat pin. Men had high starch collars. And of course, like I say, they were detachable, so it was easier to starch them really good and stiff. World War I, they had fuller but shorter skirts, and trousers came on the scene for women. In the men's department, hats. A lot of hats ruled the scene as far as what they might have worn. 1920s, of course, they had the shorter skirts. You have basically your flapper with your conch hat. And
Lots and fringe.
yeah, so, and the high heels. So 1930s, where we go into depression, things are less flamboyant, things were more feminine. Men trouser legs remained wide through the 1930s. Basically, most of these are practical. 1940s, things began to change. You saw the 1940s styles with the pads in the shoulders. And they're not small pads, they're fairly decent sized. They came back in the late 80s. So, you know, by knowing that, you can go from there. If you're interested in shirts, there is a book in the back just on different types of shirts through the years, and they are distinctive. So it's worth a look. Dating military photographs. You need to analyze the style of the uniform, covers and other accessories. Buttons are a big thing. Look at the button and see what's on there. If it's a military uniform from the US, it'll say US on the button. Otherwise, a lot of the foreign ones will have the coat of arms of the various places that they came from. For instance, Bavaria, and that's this one we had to date. It had the little coat of arms on there. So we were able to figure out that's where we needed to Google to look and see if that was the proper uniform. And I believe it was. Does it indicate a specific branch of service or military rank? That's something that you're going to have to research. If you're a general, you had certain items, epaulets on you, on your uniform, versus the private that didn't. As you go up in the service, you do get various pieces to indicate your rank. This here, the second photo there indicates a train. Talk to a train enthusiast, he can probably give you a date on that. If you're looking at an engine, they of course have certain characteristics, but the big thing is you can tell the type of engine by the wheel configuration. For instance, if there's 2 wheels in the front, 4 wheels in the middle, and 2 in the back, it's a 2-4-2. Or sometimes it's a 6 where all the wheels are together, 3 sets, and then there's 2 in the back. So it's a 0-3-2. And check for there again, the identifiable background. This gentleman here is the Buffalo Soldier. And it's shortly after the Civil War. Children's photos. Looking at the photo on your right, you'll see a couple of boys in there. One looks like he's wearing trousers and one does not. Boys and girls wore gowns until they were between 3 and 5 years old. And the girls went on with dresses and the boys got their pants. Basically short pants. And it just depended a lot on various trainings and whether his next brother up, outgrew his pants and they were handed down. The other photo on your left is actually a death photo. A lot of times they took pictures of the child that died. Oftentimes it didn't have to be a child, it could be an adult that died. Usually they're in the bed or something of that nature. You can date this by the doll. There are books just on different dolls in different eras. Or some of the room's decorations. For instance, the tile in the background. Okay, props, poses, and backdrops. These props that you see, for instance, this lady with the table, that could date back to the 1860s. They were big on having you lean on a table. I've seen them with white pillars that they're leaning on. That was popular at the time. These were full length in the 1860s. By 1890s, they did head and shoulders. And 1920s, they were over the shoulder. The backdrops, including 1860, definitely plain. You can see there's just probably drapery back there. As 1870s became more elaborate. 1880s, it was kind of an outdoors type theme. And 1890 was kind of home-like. And then we have the one here, the prop with the bicycle back then called the penny and the farthing, where you got up on top there. Some people had to use a small ladder to get there. And you had to have some really good balance to keep this going. Internet images. This image was from the 1930s. It has the child has a sailor suit on, which were popular in the 1930s. The little boy was born in 1932. They figured he was about 2 to 3 years old at the time. And he was shown in the 1940 census as being 8. So figuring on that, you're figuring somewhere between 1934 and 37 when they took the picture. You can also see the same sailor suit in this other child over here. And if you look at the detail on there, which is kind of in between them, you can see the trim on the suit. Now, this is kind of a recap of what the first or the second slide was. Look at the type. Was it a daguerreotype, ambrotype, or a tintype? Was there a gathering? Or was it just a single group event? Information, don't look at clues. Forget to look at the clues. If it's in a frame that you could take out, like not a daguerreotype or an ambrotype, but the regular ones, look and see if there's information on the back. And the fashion. Most of them weren't high style, but they were stylish. They tried to be. You might look, if you're interested in fashion, there was Good's Lady Book, I believe it was, that showed the fashion. I know the notes in here say that it took a long while for fashion to get into like the Midwest. It wasn't that long because in 1869, we had trains across the country. So they could throw these on the train and it could be in Chicago or Kansas City or Des Moines. And the seamstresses would pick these up and try to make the modifications. Next step, search published photo collections and websites for professionally dated images with elements that might match the photo you have. Here's some websites that you can use. For instance, Library of Congress, which is LOC. You might try National Archives, see what they have. Army history. That can get quite extensive depending on what country. Or here, they did change their uniforms every so often. You might not see, for instance, well, that would be a little before the photography times, but some people did not have uniforms, especially over here. They just went out and fought. Wikipedia is another good one. Take a look at it, cross-check it with their sources, and keep learning. Check on your library's how-to books, which we've got a bunch of them in the back, some of which you can check out. Or the photo tree here, or there's Rochester Institute of Technology. And the reasons it's in Rochester is because that's where Eastman Kodak used to have their headquarters. And that's it.